Hey friends, we have some news from our sponsor Text Control. They just released version 32 of their document processing library, which includes new core functionality such as document footnotes, SVG export, and more. You can integrate document editing, signing, collaboration, and PDF processing into your ASP.NET Core and Angular applications with Text Control. These powerful libraries will let your developer teams focus on their core competencies, while Text Control handles your digital document processing. Check out all the new features and see the technologies live in action by visiting the demo at demos.textcontrol.com. That's demos.textcontrol.com. Hi, I'm Scott Hanselman, and it's another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today I'm chatting with Noelle Russell. She's a Chief AI Officer at the AI Leadership Institute. How are you?
Doing great. So excited to be here.
Oh, I'm glad to be talking to you. Everyone's talking about AI. We know it's the hotness. We know it's fun to say. We know it's fun to say because we hear it on the news every day. I like to say that the word AI has good mouth feel. People like to say it. Because ML and data science don't feel good in your mouth. And but I think that what I like about you, because you and I worked together for a time at Microsoft, you've worked all over. You worked on Alexa, you worked at Accenture. You've got a lot of experience in the space. You were talking about AI. You were talking about generative AI years before anyone was even thinking about it, talking about it. How did you know that you picked the right horse? Did you know at the time?
Yeah, it's interesting because I always tell, people earlier in their career, try everything, right? It's less risky earlier in your career. As you get a little older and a little more, have more years behind you than ahead of you, you become almost risk averse. But I knew back then, and it wasn't really AI, it was the art of being able to talk to your tech. And you and I think, share kind of this passion of just like, how do I remove all friction? And I have a son with Down syndrome. So that was my mission, is I want to remove all friction. And when I saw first my son start using it, he was 9 at the time. He's now almost 20. Then I introduced my dad, who has a traumatic brain injury. He started using it. I started to realize this is going to change everything. We are no longer, I literally saw the future of, we may not need keyboards. We don't need to use, everything on Windows we taught people to do: buttons, mice, menus, drop downs. All that could go away. And so it was really much more alignment with I can see the problem this solves by the billions, as opposed to, some cool app that I got behind. I remember early in my career, I used to call myself JBoss Girl. Do you remember JBoss?
Oh, yeah.
It was middleware, and Red Hat ended up buying it. But yeah, I was all about the one product. I didn't really think strategically about that. But this time it was different.
Yeah, you were doing JBoss middleware work 15 years ago,
Yeah.
and then you also worked for years at IBM. So at some point, you got yourself to Amazon when Alexa was just starting. So this is almost 10 years ago when we hey, we're going to be talking to this thing. And I have to say, I have Alexas, I have them in the house. I've got several of them. I just got a brand new one, the one that looks like a clock.
Yes.
I think no one ever says what the reality is of Alexa. It's a dumb terminal, isn't it? It's just the magic's not on the device. The magic's on the back end.
Absolutely. And actually, I think that I always tell people who are, trying to think about how to build good experiences, and they focus on Alexa, the device. And I'm like, the device, well, number one, we as developers, we didn't do much for that, right? That market was kind of the device industry, CES. It put these devices in people's homes. So now everyone has one, which is amazing. They have some kind of device that can talk to them. Now, all I need to do is create a reason for them to talk to me, my brand, my product, my service. And I've never seen it go a different way. If I let someone successfully talk to my tech, they'll never go to my website again if I give them a good voice experience or a good, user experience. So yeah, I agree. I think, it's either Alexa, it could be, we had Google Home devices. That was a good one. I mean, for goodness sakes, all of us have voice devices either on our phone or on our wrist. We're just starting to scratch the surface of a world that's trained to use these technologies. I think it did take us, though, 10 years to get that adoption curve going, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't think if we tried to do what we're doing today 10 years ago, people were just like, what do you mean talk to this box? Like,
Yeah.
I don't get it. But now we get it. And that's why I do think, the work that's happened on OpenAI and ChatGPT, I mean, it was primed. We had primed the whole world to start talking. And when it actually started working well, like that's when it started to take off.
It always makes me think of Star Trek 4 when Scotty sits down at his Macintosh and they want the formula for transparent aluminum.
Yes.
And they go, all right, go ahead. And he goes, computer. And they say, just use the keyboard. And he says, oh, how quaint. And then starts, slapping the keyboard, and is very successful. I do think, though, that there was a bit of an uncanny valley of speech where people were disappointed by Alexa, by Siri, by Cortana. I'll use my wife, my non-technical partner, as an example. I would sometimes show her what I thought was the most amazing thing. I would say, hey, Siri, set up an appointment with my wife next Tuesday at 7:00 at, Chipotle. Very complicated, compound thing. But it wasn't parsed with a language model. It was parsed with regular expressions and dreams.
Right.
And it would work 20% of the time. And then if it didn't work, she would tease me brutally. And in her mind, and I think in the mind of some people, when Alexa or Siri or Cortana doesn't do a thing, they go, they promised us this, it doesn't work. Do you think that the language models are going to flip that bit, and we're going to enable all of these devices, these smart devices, to be smarter?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of graceful handling, right? Like in the past, if we didn't say what we wanted exactly the way the machine was trained to hear it, it would break. It was extremely fragile, very brittle. And that experience, to someone who doesn't, know the technology, they're going to be like, it's broken. I think there's an interesting kind of data point that I've uncovered is that people over the age of 75 tend to be way more lenient. They're more tolerant of bad behavior of robots. They're willing to say something over and over and over again. The same is true. And I have 6 kids, and same is true for my family. Like all the kids that are everyone under the age of 20 also has that same willingness to just kind of keep trying and working with it. It's us people in the middle that we have like zero tolerance for inaccuracy. And I think there's something to say about that. And I do think generative AI has created the ability for us to at least handle those failures gracefully, even be funny about them, even be able to provide quips, or even redirect the user down a rabbit hole of something that wasn't the original thing they wanted anyway, but they end up being happier with the experience. I think that is all true. But I do think it's kind of part of our process of being in the middle of being like, why doesn't this work the first time? Instead of maybe rethinking, it's kind of like prompt engineering. Like maybe I rethink how I said that. Maybe I should say it a different way. And generative AI is definitely assisting us with that.
Did you ever see the Saturday Night Live skit on Alexa Silver? Alexa for the greatest generation?
100%. Yes, it was on repeat for a while. My dad is like the epitome of that. I actually went, Marshawn Lynch?
Yeah.
Yes, of course. You're a Seattle guy, so you would know. But the Marshawn Lynch during the, heyday, this like 15. Marshawn Lynch calls up Jeff Bezos and complains to him and says, hey, Alexa's broken. And he actually asked a bunch of people, who knows Marshawn Lynch? I had no idea. I'm not an NFL person. I'm a little more now, but was definitely not then. Heads down. And they're like, Noel, do you know who Marshawn Lynch is? I'm like, no. And they're like, great. We need you to go to Oakland and help him fix Alexa. And it was literally a Saturday Night Live Silver episode, where he was like, I asked him, call the device so I can fix it for you. And he's like, yeah, great. Okay. Alexis. And I was like, well, there you have it. It's not Alexis. It's Alexa. And he's like, yeah, that's what I said, Alexis. And we went back and trained the model to just do whatever he said. And that's when I learned, many times these magical experiences are really just data scientists trying to make it work.
Yeah. I just remember Kenan Thompson going, Odessa.
Yeah.
Althea. It's like, just answer any, and they had a whole list of things that we'll answer to.
100%. Right? And yeah, it's amazing who you need to be to get on that list.
Yeah. Now, it's been some years since you've been there, so I'm not asking for inside baseball, but using your educated understanding of someone who has an expertise in AI and also was there when Alexa was built. As we are looking at ChatGPT being amazing and then looking at our Alexas and going, nothing interesting has happened to these devices in a couple of years. Don't you think something's coming? It has to be coming.
Absolutely. I mean, I've built over 100 apps for Alexa, and those apps still get about, I have about, I don't know, 2 million unique users. And the code on those apps has not changed. It's like one of them is about daily affirmation. So it's like one of the most popular skills on the platform. You ask for an affirmation. There are 365, like it's like 800 lines of code that just takes you through and remembers where you were. And if you come in on day 7, you get the 7th one. Like, it is not magic at all. And it's prime for a generative AI reboot. So the good news is that it's happening, but like, yeah, we're going on 2 years. ChatGPT has been in the market, and Alexa's just now starting to revive that. So I'm excited because I do think it'll give us developers who built for the platform a chance to make skills that we always dreamed could be possible. I mean, why can't I make a skill on daily affirmation happen in 40 languages? There's no reason that's not possible instantly out of the box without me as a developer having to do anything special. But I can't do that right now. So I do think we'll see Alexa kind of come into its own, which is exciting. But I think a lot of these companies, you kind of have to think about them. Microsoft's the same way. Like, these teams are kind of built a certain way to deliver software a certain way. And when you now are going to inject something, it's just like every other company on the planet. People are actually worried, like, wait a second, that's my baby you're calling ugly. That's my stuff. I built that model from scratch. And so I think there's a little bit of holding on to the old way until absolutely necessary to move away from it. And Amazon's there now. I think we're weeks away, I think, from that launch. I have a couple of interviews with some periodicals in anticipation of the launch of the new Gen AI model on Alexa. So it should be exciting times. But yeah, why wait? I anticipate it's a human problem, not a technical one.
Yeah. But there is also, costs of goods sold, right? There's the cogs of the thing. So like the Alexas that I have in my house and the one that's on my desk right now that I had to put on mute because it kept hearing me mention its name. I paid $59 for it 3 years ago, and I haven't paid since. How many dollars, cents, pennies, fractions of pennies does it cost every time I tell it to turn the lights off? I think that when people are building naive products, they just send strings to ChatGPT or 4.0, and it costs God knows how much money. I can only assume that if I were going to make an Alexa smart speaker kind of a thing today, I would have to come up with some kind of a subscription. But I also worry about sustainability. How many trees are getting burned because I just didn't want to stand up and turn the light switch off? Right? I don't want to do that. I don't want to feel like that.
Having them turned off in the first place. So
there's that too. But you know what I'm saying? Like, how is it a sustainable business to have a dumb terminal smart speaker pointed at a giant model that costs $2 every time I ask it a dumb question about how old Brad Pitt is?
Yeah, exactly. And I actually think Amazon's kind of struggling with this too, right? Like, in the news, we saw them have huge layoffs and cuts to the Alexa team because they realized, like, wait, okay, the promise. And I also think leadership change, right? This was Jeff Bezos's pet project to create the Star Trek computer. And now he's off building rockets now. Like, that's his pet project. So there isn't someone who has the same. And I always tell people, when you build AI, one of the most important things you need to have going for you is an understanding of your core values. Like, what's going to keep you up, like working the midnight oil in order to deliver this project to production, because it has to be tied to who you are, or you're going to give up. Like many facial recognition companies have done. Like, it gets very hard. And if you don't have the stomach for it, you won't be able to win in the game. And that's kind of, I always look at the leadership of these companies, like, who has the stomach to kind of do all the hard things, train it on a bunch of different languages that they weren't expecting. When you have to add additional training data, that's more cost, almost exponential cost to what you originally anticipated. So yeah, I think, and many times that ROI is not, as we wish it would be, instantaneous, right? It ends up happening over 3 to 5, oh wait, Alexa, 10 years. And they're just barely in the black. So I think it does take, both from a sustainability perspective, but also from a business model perspective, like, you have to be really in it for the long haul. And why are you in it? Like, are you in it because it's a direct tie to revenue? Or are you in it because it's making happy customers who buy more stuff on Amazon because of this thing that they have in their house? And that, I think, is the more broad correlation, is that people who have Alexa devices buy more stuff on Amazon. not through Alexa, but just in general. And I think that might be a lesson to learn.
Yeah. I think that they thought that everyone would be, buying groceries on Alexa, and it would be a great loss leader. And it would be just like, hey, Alexa, put on give me some paper towels. But
Yes.
I don't think that happened,
Yeah, no, I agree with you. But I do think people use it for their lists. Like, I think they think of Alexa and devices like it, like a household name, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's not many people I can talk to that don't know what it is, and many of them have had it, to your point, for years.
Yeah.
So the world is well trained. And I think that's the good news, is that I should say the Western world is well trained on kind of
Yeah.
using these devices to interact with software. And that goes back to your earlier point. What are we doing as builders, as business owners? Like, what are we doing to capitalize on that? Now that we have
Yeah.
an audience that has a terminal, where's our very cool experience on the back end that's going to have them build a better relationship with us as a business?
Yeah.
That's not happening. And that, like I said, is more of a people problem, I find, than a technical one. Like, the tech is ready. We could do so much cool stuff.
Yeah.
And we're just not
Well, it's
doing
just organizational willpower and reminding people that it is a UI that is an unused UI.
it. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Hey, friends and digital marketers, this one's for you. I've got 30 seconds to tell you about Wix Studio, the web platform for agencies and enterprises. So here are a few things you can do in 30 seconds or less when you manage projects on Wix Studio. You can work in sync with your team on one canvas. You can reuse templates, widgets, and sections across sites. You can create a client kit for seamless handovers and leverage best-in-class SEO defaults across all your Wix sites. Time's up, but the list keeps going. Step into Wix Studio to see more. One of the things that I also think is worth noting is that I don't know if it happened on purpose, but I appreciate that ChatGPT and Copilot are now not names. They're not proper names. We spent 10 years yelling at invisible women to do stuff.
Trust me.
And it just feels gross. You know what I mean? But I don't want the wake word to be computer, because then it would happen all the time. So I need some word that is a non-gendered word, because I just have never liked the idea of anthropomorphizing the thing. There's nobody in there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But
What do you think
again,
about that?
it's easy to say that now, but I don't know that without anthropomorphizing it, we would have gotten the adoption that we got over the last 10 years on a device, right? Like, I think there is some strategic, and there were reasons behind Alexa. Like, how do you find a word that in the lexicon does not cost the least number of false wakes with the highest level of recognition? Like, from those of the linguists out there would, confess that there's not many words that fall into that category. And the more general of the word, the more likely. And we had lots of false wakes anyway, even with this intentionality. Devices were waking up when you said anything similar. But I do think that that's part of the challenge, is like, if you're going to build a product that you want to reach 100 million people or 1 billion people, what do you name it? And that's why I also think we're now mature enough to be like, hey, we've learned some lessons. There were some people that were hurt by the fact that device was named Alexa, specifically young girls in second grade with that name.
Named Alexa.
Yeah. Like that was not a good life for them. And they ended up trying to file a class action lawsuit. Like, their moms were like, I'm not changing my daughter's name because you built a device that happened.
Well, yeah, nobody wants to wake up and find out that, like, their name sucks because some person who did something horrible has their name and they share it.
It's a side joke in every conversation you have.
Right.
Like,
and then you got to switch to your middle name or whatever. So
oh no. And then the moms of the world are like, oh no, you didn't change a name I negotiated hard for during that part of the pregnancy. So yeah.
I've always thought that maybe Echo would be a good word for it, because it's already a brand that they own. It's on the list. I can name it Echo.
It's a good statistic, though. I should look and find out how many devices have which wake words. That would be interesting data.
But I wonder why, like, you see online, Sam Altman, the OpenAI guy, has a very strange and possibly problematic, relationship with how he thinks an AI should work, because he's obsessed with that Scarlett Johansson movie, Her.
Yes.
Which again gets into like these uncomfortable relationships with, gendered individuals who do not exist, right? Yes. This person does not exist. And he wanted it to sound like Scarlett Johansson. 100%. She's suing him now, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
So, but I'm noticing though that, that you mentioned the generation gap. My sons, they don't think about it that way, because ChatGPT is just a thing. It's an app. It's a service. And by not naming it a real human name, we're moving away from anthropomorphizing it. So I think you're right. Anthropomorphizing it jump-started it, but I don't know if it's
Yes.
required anymore for its success.
I agree with you. And I think ChatGPT proved that, right? Like, and it's interesting because we're almost reversed back into a push to talk mode, right? So in the beginning of Alexa, I don't know if you remember, there was a device, I have it right over there, called a tap, and you would press it and talk to it in order for Alexa to work. And then that was kind of like the old way of doing it. We just want a wake word. But now if you go to ChatGPT and use its voice application, it is
Mm-hmm.
also push to talk, and people actually like it and they're using it. It's still, I think, a little bit clunky, but it's in V1, so we'll see it get better. But yeah, I think it's interesting that what happens in a world where I don't actually, I have a one of those humane AI pins, right? It's also push to talk. I have to tap it for the device to start listening to me. So I don't know. I think there's something to be said about, in a user experience that is voice enabled, how
Mm-hmm.
much of this wake word stuff do we even have to do if these devices are going to be very personal on
Right.
your, as opposed to having to yell to it across the room. I think that was the dream in the beginning, but
Right.
I
Right.
find
Right.
lots of us are using these devices in our hands or on
Yeah.
our a wearable.
Well, I mentioned this analogy again. I want to hit it harder and see if it lands for you. This idea of the uncanny valley. The uncanny valley in like 3D animation is like when it's getting more and more realistic, and then like, oh, its face is dead inside and it looks like a zombie, and then it becomes amazing again. So like Thanos is on the far right side of the uncanny valley because it's like, wow, that looks amazing. And then like Tom Hanks in the Polar Express is like deeply in the uncanny valley. So there's a creepiness factor. And
Yeah.
there was a humane pin competitor, low key launched yesterday at the time of this recording, called Friend, that is basically a necklace pendant that is always listening. And then it's always buffering like the last couple of minutes of what you're doing. And then if you want it to act on that, you tap it. So that's another model. So rather than
Yeah.
tap to speak, it's
Right.
speak, speak, speak. I'm interested in your input. Don't you think that the always listening, which was a huge problem with Alexa when it first launched,
Huge.
gets into the uncanny valley of creepiness?
100%. So it's interesting when I wore the AI pin on stage in San Francisco, 2,000 people were there. The number one question I had when I got off stage, as opposed to like, oh my gosh, that was so cool. You talked about this and this. It was, is that thing on your shoulder listening right now? Like that was the number one question I got. And so, yeah, I think, and I told them, I'm like, well, a good user experience with a voice device will let you know when it's listening. And Alexa does the same thing. My little Moxie device also does the same thing. Like robots will tell you when they're listening, and usually it's a color change of some kind of LED display. And maybe so. For example, the Ray-Bans. I'm sure you've seen the new
Mm-hmm.
I had one of the first ones. As soon as you start recording or taking pictures, there's a light that shows you. You can't be like all spy and do things without people knowing, because there's a light that's the right thing to do. Ethically, people should know that you're listening. The challenge with the device that's listening is that as people enter your world, right? As they come and talk to you, as they pass by having a conversation with a friend, all that data gets picked up too. And what is
Mm-hmm.
their rights to that information? Then on top of that, once someone has your utterances, now we understand this concept of building neural text to speech and neural speech to text. Someone can use those utterances to create your likeness. And I don't know if you know, but in the like legal system, you do not currently, there is no legislation that states that you have the right to own your own likeness, which is why people have to go and fight for their likeness to be preserved. It should be a given right that, hey, that's my face, that's my voice. You can't use it. But no, people have to sue you. They have to create and establish a precedent, and these precedents don't exist right now. So I think 100% it is uncanny valley. It's also kind of ethically questionable when you have
Mm-hmm.
devices that are just going to be open air listening to everything in your house. That's one thing, right? Which is why I think Alexa survived that kind of debacle from a security perspective, because it's in your house at least. But I don't know if you remember, people used to scream at Alexas from outside a house to get it to unlock doors before we
Yep.
figured out the whole voice pen thing. So they all have their challenges, I think.
Yeah. The That's so interesting. I was in a meeting at Microsoft Build a couple of months ago, and it was one of these like NDA partner meetings, a meeting after the presentation, and I was in the meeting and I was talking to some folks, and then I noticed that one of these guys had a light on his glasses, And I was surprised at my own visceral reaction. I'm usually into the gadgets, and
Hmm.
I didn't like think this reaction. I felt it in my chest. And I said, are you recording?" And it was such an inappropriate thing. We are in a closed door
100%.
NDA'd meeting, and he thought it was cool to just, "Oh, but this is just for my own use." And I was like, "But I don't know that, dude. I don't
Right.
like you're sitting there."
That's the
I
ethics
was
right there. I'm like,
so frustrated.
how do you not say something? Like, I always just tell people, I'm
He
like,
didn't
there
say
is
a
no,
word until we mentioned
yeah,
it. And then he was like,
until
"Oh,
you
I'm so
got
sorry."
busted.
Yeah. He got busted. But like, I mean, busted isn't quite the word, but he was thoughtless, and I was maybe a little more surprisingly crisp than I would have ordinarily
Oh,
been.
sure. But that's what we're finding out data wise, right? Stanford did a study on trust, and I think it's extremely interesting. But this whole AI trust and what happens when people realize that there's a different level of trust. You lose trust no matter what when you implement AI. Like your customers will trust you less because you're using a robot rather than you. That is just the truth. However, the level of trust decreases much further if they find out it was a robot after it thought it was a human or after it thought you weren't recording, right? So it's way worse to walk into a meeting and then later be like, "Oh, and I recorded this. Would you like the would you like the notes?" Rather than saying, "Hey, I use this device to help me record." Even if you just from a psychological perspective tell people, "I do it for this reason." Most people are not going to say no. Like most people are going to be like, "Oh, I get it. You can yeah, sure."
Yeah, well, it's like a news person taking their recorder and putting it on the table.
Exactly.
"Would you mind if I recorded this?" And
Yes.
Microsoft Teams already announces to everyone, "We're about to record. Make sure
Yep.
that you know." Da 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 da.
Leave
Everyone's
now.
cool with that, but it's just walking in with like a camera in your face
You might, yeah, without saying anything. Like,
without saying
yeah,
anything. But
yeah. I
okay,
think
so then do you
part of
think,
that.
though, as a person who's focused on ethics and responsible AI, that there's going to be this tension between doing it right and then convenience? Because ultimately we give up our privacy, we give up things simply for, well, it's so convenient though. Gosh.
100%. I think one of my challenges, for example, I work with realtors a lot. I'm about to speak at the National Association of Realtors and be their opening keynote. And in this keynote, I always like to mention to them, like they're very quick to be like, well, they're selling, right? They're just super excited. They want to sell. They want to do as much as they can to get as many leads as they can and close as much business as they can. So a product came out called Air. I don't know if you know it, but it basically it's a neural text to speech. It allows you to write a script and a human sounding voice will get on a phone and have a conversation with you, with the customer. It'll drive them to even buy something. And the challenge, though, is that it does not disclose at any time that it isn't human. It does not. And these, again, there are principles of ethical and responsible design that would tell you not to ever do that because it's just not cool. But this is it gone to market. And these people that are immediately interested, who are, to your point, more interested in the benefit it offers them than the impact or consequence. And right now, there is no legal consequence. Like there is nothing. Like, I mean, there might be some fine that they may get eventually when we finally get some legislation through. But right now, there's no consequence. It's literally just, do I do the right thing and tell someone when I'm using this technology, even if it will give me a small hit on trust, it'll actually build trust in my brand as a whole. I think really people have to start thinking very strategically about what kind of company do you want to be in this world of AI? And that at the end of the day, people pick people. People do
Yeah.
business with people. You might be able to do some shortcuts on the front end to get someone in, but to create lifelong customer relationships, you and I know this very well. Like people care about you. And so I say, like, I always tell people, lean in on building responsibly, even if it takes a little longer, even if you have to do a little bit more work, because at the end of the day, people will trust you. And then you can use AI to accelerate those results for your customers and for your employees.
Yeah. It feels though like we need to vote with our feet. And like I think that I am a person that prefers a little bit more regulation, but then in order to have regulation, you need educated and informed legislators. Then the free market capitalists are like, well, let it figure itself out. And then I think that'll always come down to convenience. But it does seem though that like people are voting with their feet and they're going, ew, that doesn't feel good. I don't like that. You know,
Yeah. I mean, just think about Google Lenses, right? If it came out now, it might do okay.
oh,
But
Google
back in,
Glass. Yeah.
yeah, Google Glass. Yeah. Like back in the day, like people literally voted with their feet and was like, that is creepy. I'm never going to use anything like that. Now we're seeing visors and all sorts of
Yeah,
like,
Ray-Ban is no one is calling them glass holes like they did when
right.
they
Yeah,
when those came out.
exactly. So I do think, yeah, and that's one of the benefits when I build anything with AI. I always tell people in cybersecurity they call it like a red teaming, right? You need this team that's going to like ethically attack and try and break your system. And in AI, there's a similar concept. It's called AI red teaming, but it's a little bit different because in addition to adversarial attacks, you actually just need a group of people who are going to tell you this is good. This is a good experience. This is a bad experience. This experience resonates with this audience. This is going to hurt these people. This is going to offend this group of people. Like, who's going to tell you that if you end up having a team that's very homogenous in nature? So I think that's also part of anyone who's building AI systems. Like, just think you're going to want to collect as many of these diverse personalities and perspectives into one room as possible. So before you go to market, you can get that feedback that says, wow, you are totally uncanny valley here, buddy. You should probably take a double take on what you're trying to build. Most people, they do that testing in production, and you can just do a little Google search to find out how well that's gone.
Well, yeah, we know how well testing and production went in the last couple of weeks. Not awesome. Cool. Well, I look forward to seeing if your predictions come true. And I thank you so much for hanging out. And I also want to take a moment to congratulate you. I understand that you were recently given a Microsoft MVP on a new category of responsible AI specifically.
Yes.
So congratulations. It's super cool.
Yeah, super exciting. I'm excited for the year. So thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
We have been chatting with Noelle Russell, expert on AI and a chief AI officer at the AI Leadership Institute. This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.